My name is Clara, and I'm 32 years old. I'm standing in the middle of a formal dining room, the crystal glasses shimmering under the light of a chandelier I personally selected. My father, his face purple with rage, has just pointed a trembling finger at the oak door and screamed, "Get out of this house! You're nothing but a lowlife who got lucky." The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. He was kicking me out of the house I bought for them, from the company I built from scratch. But little did he know, that wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of war, and he had just handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. It was supposed to be a celebration. The 5-year anniversary of Innovate Logistics, my company. My baby. I had invited my entire family, my parents, Richard and Helen, and my older brother Mark, to a catered dinner at their home. Their beautiful, sprawling home in the suburbs that my company's success had paid for. The mortgage, the property taxes, the landscapers who came twice a week. All of it was funded by the business I started in a garage with my college savings. I wanted to share the milestone. I wanted them, for once, to see me and be proud. The evening started, as it always did, with a thick layer of polite fiction. My mother floated around, complimenting the caterers I had hired, as if she were the gracious host of a party she had arranged. My brother Mark, who I had given a comfortable, high-paying director of operations job to, despite his complete lack of qualifications, was holding court, telling some exaggerated story about a shipping deal he'd supposedly brokered. I saw the admiring glances from my father and felt that familiar, dull ache in my chest. Mark could show up late 3 times a week, and my father would call it a relaxed management style. I could land a $45 million contract, and he'd ask if I remembered to check the fine print. I tried to ignore it. I clinked glasses, smiled, and made small talk. The theme of the evening, at least in my mind, was gratitude. I planned to announce my new bonus structure, one that would give my parents an even larger dividend, and Mark an even bigger salary. I thought maybe, just maybe, a grand gesture of generosity would finally break through their carefully constructed wall of condescension. The moment came after dessert. I stood up, tapping my glass for attention. "I just want to thank you all for being here," I started, my voice a little shaky. 5 years ago, Innovate was just an idea. Today, it's a leader in the industry, and I couldn't have maintained the motivation to get here without my family. The words felt like ash in my mouth, but I said them anyway. To celebrate, I've decided to implement a new profit-sharing plan, which will significantly increase the annual bonuses for key stakeholders. I looked directly at my father and brother. "That includes you." There was a moment of silence. My mother gave a tight, pleased smile. Mark looked smug, but my father, his expression darkened. He didn't look grateful. He looked furious. "That's it?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "That's your big announcement? You moving some numbers around on a spreadsheet?" I was stunned. "Dad, this is a huge increase. It's a way of showing my appreciation for your support." He laughed, a short, bitter sound. "My support? Clara, let's be honest. This whole thing," he gestured around the room, "was my idea. You were just the one with the time on your hands to file the paperwork. You got lucky with 1 or 2 clients, and you've been riding that wave ever since. But the strategy, the vision, that was always me, advising you from the sidelines." My jaw dropped. His advice had consisted of telling me my business plan was cute and that I should get a real job with benefits. He had actively discouraged me at every turn. "That's not true," I whispered, the blood draining from my face. "Oh, it's not," he sneered. "Then what about your latest brilliant idea? The one you didn't even bother to consult me on?" I knew immediately what he was talking about. I had been in negotiations to acquire a smaller tech firm in another state that would revolutionize our tracking systems. It was a game changer, the move that would take us from a major player to an untouchable giant. I had been waiting for the deal to be finalized before I told them. Someone must have leaked it. "I was going to tell you when it was a sure thing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You were going to tell me?" he bellowed, slamming his hand on the table, making the glasses jump. "You don't make a move that big without my approval, or Mark's. He's your director of operations, for God's sake. You go behind our backs, playing with money you don't understand, acting like some big shot. It's my company." The words flew out of me before I could stop them. "I made it. I own 100% of it. I get to make the decisions. That was it. That was the line. The truth I had so carefully danced around for 5 years. The truth they had all conveniently ignored while cashing my checks. My father stood up, his face contorted in a mask of pure fury. "You own nothing," he hissed. "You are an ungrateful child who has forgotten where she came from. We gave you everything. This family gave you your start, and you have the audacity to stand there and throw your money in our faces?" My mother was silent, staring at her plate. Mark just smirked, a cruel, triumphant little smile. He was loving this. "I built a $45 million company and put every one of you on the payroll," I said, my voice trembling with a hurt so deep it felt like a physical wound. "I did this. Me." "You did nothing," he spat. "You're arrogant and you're out of control. I've had enough of it. Get out of this house. Leave. You're nothing but a lowlife who got lucky." The word lowlife echoed in the silent room. It was the word he used for people he felt were beneath him. The mailman, the waitress at the diner, the people who worked for a living without the benefit of a family name. And now, he was using it on me, the daughter who had funded his entire life for the past 5 years. I looked at their faces. My father, righteous in his delusion. My brother, basking in my humiliation. My mother, a statue of cowardly inaction. In that single horrifying moment, I saw everything with perfect clarity. They didn't see me as a daughter or a successful businesswoman. They saw me as a resource, a walking, talking bank account that had suddenly developed a mind of its own, and they were here to put it back in its place. As I turned and walked towards the door, without another word, a cold, hard resolve settled in my gut. They thought they were just kicking me out of a family dinner. They had no idea they had just handed me my resignation. And I was about to show them what happens when the lowlife who signs their paychecks decides to move her business and their jobs to another state. Have you ever poured your heart and soul into something, only to have the people closest to you tear you down? Share your story in the comments. It's so important we know we're not alone. And make sure you subscribe, because you will not want to miss what happens next. The drive away from that house, my house, was a blur. The cold night air felt sharp against my hot cheeks, and the single word, lowlife, played on a loop in my head. It wasn't just the insult itself, but the venom behind it, the sheer audacity. My father had rewritten history so completely in his own mind that he actually believed it. And the worst part? This wasn't a new story. It was just the final, ugliest chapter of a book I had been forced to read my entire life. It started in childhood, as these things often do. My brother Mark was born with a crown on his head, at least in my parents' eyes. He was the heir, the charming, athletic boy who could do no wrong. His C-grade report cards were framed as him being a social butterfly, not a bookworm. When he broke a neighbor's window with a baseball, my father paid for it and lauded his powerful throwing arm. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, responsible one. My straight A's were expected, not celebrated. When I won the state science fair in 10th grade, my father's only comment was, "Well, that's nice, dear. Just don't let it go to your head." My accomplishments were treated like oddities, slight deviations from my primary role, which was to be quiet, supportive, and not upstage my brother. This dynamic bled into every aspect of our lives. When it was time for college, my parents took out a second mortgage to send Mark to an expensive private university, where he majored in communications and spent 4 years partying. I was encouraged to attend the local state school and live at home to save money. I didn't complain. I worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, and graduated with honors and 0 debt. It was during my senior year, working a mind-numbing logistics internship at a shipping company, that the idea for Innovate Logistics was born. I saw the inefficiencies, the outdated technology, the massive potential for a smarter, data-driven approach. When I presented my business plan to my father, he patted me on the head. Literally. "That's a very detailed little project, Clara," he'd said, a condescending smile on his face. "But maybe you should focus on finding a nice young man and settling down. This business world is brutal." He didn't offer a dime. He didn't offer a word of encouragement. He offered me a dismissal. So I did it myself. I took the $10,000 I had painstakingly saved and started the company in our dusty, spider-infested garage. For the first year, I was the CEO, the programmer, the sales team, and the janitor. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and a burning desire to prove him wrong. I remember one night, around 2 a.m., I finally debugged a piece of routing software I'd been working on for weeks. I was so excited, I ran inside to tell them. My father just grunted from his armchair, annoyed that I'd woken him. "Stop making so much noise with your little hobby, Clara." My little hobby landed its first major client 6 months later, and then another, and another. Within 2 years, I had to move out of the garage and into a real office. I had to hire staff. The company was growing faster than I could have ever imagined. And that's when the narrative began to shift. Suddenly, my father started talking about how he had always known I had it in me. He'd reminisce about our late-night strategy sessions in the garage, sessions that never happened. Then came the requests. Mark had flunked out of his third post-college job. "He just needs a chance, Clara," my mother pleaded. "A place where he's understood. He's so smart he just doesn't apply himself for people he doesn't respect." The implication was clear. So, against my better judgment, I gave my utterly unqualified brother the title of Director of Operations and a 6-figure salary. His primary operation seemed to be extending his lunch breaks to 3 hours and using the company credit card for golf outings. The first time a major shipment was delayed because Mark forgot to sign a crucial piece of paperwork, I confronted him. My father stepped in. "Don't you dare blame your brother," he warned me. "A good leader takes responsibility for her team's mistakes. You should have double-checked his work." Next, my parents started dropping hints about their financial struggles. Their house was getting old, the neighborhood was changing. "We just wish we could have a place to retire with dignity," my mother would sigh dramatically. "After all the sacrifices we made for you and Mark." The guilt was laid on so thick you could cut it with a knife. So I bought them the house. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in the best part of town. I didn't put my name on the deed. I wanted it to be a pure gift, a mistake I would come to regret. The moment they moved in, it became their house, a testament to Richard's lifetime of hard work. My contribution was erased. For 5 years, this was the status quo. I worked tirelessly to build my empire, and they worked tirelessly to spend its profits while minimizing my role in creating it. My father appointed himself my unofficial senior advisor, a role that mostly involved him inviting his friends to my office to show it off, and then taking me aside to tell me my dress was unprofessional or my tone with a client was too aggressive for a woman. They bled me dry, not just financially, but emotionally. I was a success in every measurable way, yet in their eyes, I was still the little girl with the cute hobby in the garage, a fluke who needed their sage and completely fabricated guidance. The dinner party wasn't an aberration. It was the culmination of 1,000 cuts, a lifetime of being told my value was conditional. They weren't just a toxic family, they were a parasitic organism, and I was the host. And that night, when he called me a lowlife, I finally realized that parasites can't survive when the host decides to walk away. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. My apartment, a place I had decorated to be my sanctuary, suddenly felt tainted, like an extension of the office where I was forced to play a role. Instead, I drove to a hotel, checked in under a different name, and sat on the edge of a sterile, impersonal bed, the city lights twinkling outside my window. The rage and the hurt were still there, but something else was solidifying underneath it, an ice-cold clarity, the fog of obligation, of filial duty, of a desperate, childish need for their approval, was finally lifting. My father's words, "Get out," weren't a rejection anymore. They were a release. That night was my turning point. It wasn't a single revelation, but a series of them, hitting me one after another like aftershocks from an earthquake. The first was about the leak. How did my father know about the acquisition of FutureTrack, the tech firm in Austin? It was a highly sensitive negotiation. I had only discussed the details with my CFO, a woman named Diane who had been with me since year 2, and my legal team. The thought that Diane would betray me was unthinkable, which left only one sickening possibility. I opened my laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. I logged into the company's administrative backend, a place I hadn't needed to poke around in for years. As CEO, I had access to everything, every email, every file transfer, every login. I started with Mark's account. It was a digital wasteland of fantasy football leagues and links to golf websites. But then I looked at his sent items from the past week, and there it was. An email sent from his work account to my father's personal Gmail address. The subject line was, "Clara's reckless power move." My blood ran cold as I opened it. It was a forward of a confidential internal memo about the future track acquisition that I had shared with my senior leadership team, which technically included Mark. Attached was a note from my brother. "Dad, this is that thing I was telling you about. She's going to run the company into the ground, buying this stupid tech company in Texas. You need to shut this down before she bankrupts us all." Bankrupts us. The possessive pronoun was like a punch to the gut. He saw my company, my life's work, as his birthright, and he had actively conspired with my father to undermine a decision that would secure our future for the next decade. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it almost took my breath away. It wasn't just incompetence or laziness, it was deliberate sabotage born from a toxic cocktail of jealousy and entitlement. My father hadn't just gotten angry, he had been primed for it by his own son. That was the moment the hurt died, and the strategist was born. The Clara who had cried in her car was gone. In her place was the CEO who had built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. I had outmaneuvered corporate giants. I had navigated complex international shipping laws. I had stared down venture capitalists who wanted to eat my company for lunch. And now I was going to apply that same ruthless focus to my own family. The decision crystallized in that hotel room at 3 a.m. I wasn't just going to cut them off. That would be too simple, too clean. They had spent years diminishing me, taking credit for my work, and treating me like an ATM. They believed they were the brains of the operation. Fine. I was going to show them what the operation looked like without its actual brain. The acquisition in Austin was my game changer. It was the future. My father was right about one thing. It was a huge move. A move that would require relocating key infrastructure and personnel. My personnel. A slow smile spread across my face. They wanted control? They wanted to feel important? I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would give them a front-row seat to watch the empire they thought they owned crumble into dust, simply because the lowlife who built it was no longer there to hold it up. The plan began to form, piece by piece. It wasn't just about moving the company anymore. It was about surgically dismantling the entire false reality they had built for themselves. It was about justice. Not just for me, but for the quiet girl who won the science fair and just wanted her dad to be proud. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer. "David," I said, my voice steady and firm, "we need to talk about corporate restructuring and relocation immediately." The game was on. The next 3 months were a masterclass in quiet warfare. On the surface, I played the part of the penitent daughter. I sent a brief, formal email to my parents and Mark, apologizing for my outburst at dinner. I said I was under a lot of stress and that I valued their input. It was a calculated move, designed to make them feel they had won, that they had successfully put me back in my box. Their response was telling. My mother sent back a gushing email about how she knew I'd come to my senses. My father didn't reply directly, but my mother told me he was pleased I was learning my place. Mark was insufferably smug, striding around the office like he'd been promoted to king. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they couldn't see the ground shifting beneath their feet. While they were basking in their perceived victory, I was moving pieces around the chessboard with the precision of a grandmaster. My first move was to accelerate the acquisition of Future Track in Austin. I flew to Texas 3 times in 1 month under the guise of client meetings. In reality, I was finalizing the deal and, more importantly, scouting. I wasn't just buying a company, I was buying a future. I found a new corporate headquarters, a sleek, modern building with triple the capacity of our current office. I met with the Austin City Council and the Chamber of Commerce, negotiating incredible tax incentives for relocating my business and bringing jobs to their city. They rolled out the red carpet for me, treating me with a level of respect my own family had never shown. Back home, I became a ghost in my own company. I delegated most of the day-to-day operations to my trusted CFO, Diane, letting Mark believe he was in charge. He would swan into my office with some half-baked idea he'd brainstormed, and I'd nod and say, "That's an interesting perspective, Mark. Let's table that for now." He'd puff out his chest and walk away, completely oblivious to the fact that I was simultaneously on a conference call with architects, planning the layout of our new Texas headquarters. My lawyer, David, and I worked late into the night, restructuring everything. Innovate Logistics was an LLC with me as the sole member. Legally, I could do whatever I wanted, but I had to be strategic. The first step was creating a new parent company, Innovate Holdings, based in Texas. Innovate Logistics would become a subsidiary of this new entity. This move was crucial for tax purposes and for cleanly severing the old operational structure. Next, I turned my attention to the assets. The house my parents lived in was in their name, but the mortgage was being paid automatically every month from a business account. With David's help, I set up a trust. I transferred a lump sum into it, enough to pay off their mortgage completely. It was, I decided, my final severance package, a parting gift. Once that money was transferred, I closed the original account. They wouldn't notice until the first of the month when the automatic payment for everything else, the utilities, the gardeners, the country club membership I foolishly paid for my father, would bounce. Then came the most critical part of the plan, my people. My company was more than just me. It was 52 employees, engineers, developers, accountants, and logistics coordinators who had worked their tails off for me. They were the true heart of the company. I couldn't just abandon them. So, I began a series of confidential, one-on-one meetings. I laid it all out. The move, the new headquarters, the vision for the future. I offered every single one of them a job in Austin, complete with a generous relocation package, a significant pay raise, and a housing bonus. I was terrified they'd say no, that their roots were too deep. But as I explained the new opportunities, the state-of-the-art facilities, and the chance to be part of a company that was truly investing in its future and its employees, I saw excitement in their eyes. By the end of 2 weeks, 50 out of 52 employees had accepted the offer. The 2 who declined were nearing retirement, and I offered them a generous early retirement package. The final piece of the puzzle was Mark. I started documenting everything. His late arrivals, his long lunches, the tasks he failed to complete, the costs on his corporate card. I had HR compile a formal record of his performance, or lack thereof. It was a thick file, full of ignored warnings and missed deadlines that I, in my previous state of familial obligation, had always let slide. Now, it was my smoking gun. For 3 months, I lived a double life. In one, I was the subdued CEO, seemingly beaten into submission. In the other, I was a silent whirlwind, dismantling my old life and building a new one hundreds of miles away. The moving trucks were booked. The new office was being furnished. The employee contracts were signed. All of it happened in the shadows, right under their noses. They thought they had clipped my wings, but I was quietly building a new airplane. They were about to learn that you should never, ever underestimate a lowlife who got lucky, especially when her luck is something she built with her own 2 hands. The stage was set. I chose the company's main conference room for the final act. It was a space my father particularly loved, with its long mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a view he often claimed credit for inspiring. I called a mandatory board meeting. Of course, we didn't have a board. The attendees were me, my father, the self-appointed senior advisor, and my brother, the director of operations. I also invited my CFO, Diane, and my lawyer, David, to be present as official witnesses. My family arrived in high spirits. My father walked in like he owned the place, clapping Mark on the back. "All right, Clara, let's hear it. Another one of your spreadsheets?" he boomed, taking the seat at the head of the table. My seat. I let him. Mark smirked and slumped into the chair beside him, already scrolling through his phone. My mother had called me that morning, buzzing with excitement. "Your father thinks you're finally going to announce that you're making him a true partner," she'd trilled. The delusion was breathtaking. I stood at the front of the room by the large presentation screen. I took a deep breath, the air tasting of victory. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice even and calm. I've called this meeting to announce a significant strategic pivot for the company, a new direction that will define the future of Innovate Logistics. My father leaned forward, a greedy glint in his eye. It's about time. I've been telling you for years we need to be more aggressive. I agree, I said, looking directly at him. Aggression, when correctly applied, can be a powerful tool. Which is why, effective immediately, Innovate Logistics, as you know it, will cease its primary operations in this state. The silence was instant and absolute. Mark finally looked up from his phone, a confused frown on his face. My father's smile faltered. What are you talking about? Cease operations? Is this a joke? I've never been more serious, I replied, clicking a button on the remote in my hand. The screen behind me lit up with the sleek, modern logo of Innovate Holdings against a backdrop of the Austin, Texas skyline. 3 months ago, I finalized the acquisition of FutureTrack, a leading logistics tech firm based in Austin. I have since established a new parent company, Innovate Holdings, and we are moving the entire corporate headquarters and all operational infrastructure to Texas. My father stared at the screen, then at me, his face turning a familiar shade of red. You did what? Without my approval? We forbid you from doing this. Let's be clear, I said, my voice hardening. There is no we. There is me, the sole owner and CEO of this company. You are not a partner. You are not on the board. You hold no shares and have no executive authority. You are, for all legal and practical purposes, an outside consultant whose advice I have now chosen to disregard. You ungrateful little, he started, rising from his chair. Sit down, I commanded, my voice sharp as a shard of glass. He was so shocked, he actually did. We're not finished. I clicked the remote again. The next slide was a screenshot of the email from Mark to my father. Clara's reckless power move. I read his treacherous words aloud. Dad, you need to shut this down before she bankrupts us all. Mark went pale. He looked like a fish gasping for air. You took that out of context. Did I? I looked at him, feeling nothing but pity. Or did you, the director of operations, actively conspire with an outside party to sabotage a key corporate initiative? An initiative, by the way, that has now increased the company's valuation by 30%. I turned to Diane. Diane, what was the primary cause of the Q2 shipping delays to our West Coast clients? Diane, cool and professional, opened a folder. The delays were a direct result of unsigned customs forms. The responsibility for signing those forms fell to the Director of Operations, Mr. Mark, she said, not even looking at him. I advanced to the next slide. It was a detailed summary of Mark's performance review file. 47 late arrivals in 6 months, over $15,000 in unapproved expenses on his company card, and 3 formal warnings for dereliction of duty. Mark, due to your consistent underperformance, your active sabotage of company strategy, and gross misuse of company funds, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. I slid a termination letter across the table. Security will escort you out. Mark just stared at it, speechless. My father finally found his voice, a strangled roar. You can't do this. This is his career. This is his life. His career was a gift, I retorted. A gift he squandered. And now the gift has been rescinded. I looked back at my father. And speaking of gifts, I know you've been concerned about your financial security and retirement, so I've taken care of it. Another click. A bank statement appeared on the screen, showing the lump sum transfer to the trust. The mortgage on your house has been paid in full. You now own it, free and clear. Congratulations. My mother, who had been listening on speakerphone from my father's cell, let out a relieved gasp. But my father wasn't placated. He was a predator who smelled blood, and he just realized the prey was gone. The mortgage? What about the rest of it? The club membership? The utilities? Ah, yes, I said. As of the 1st of this month, the corporate account that paid for those miscellaneous expenses was closed. You see, since you are no longer affiliated with this company in any capacity, it would be highly inappropriate for Innovate Holdings to continue covering your personal living costs. That would be something a lowlife might do, and I'm trying to be more professional. The word lowlife hung in the air between us, his own insult, now my weapon. The color drained from his face as the reality of the situation finally crashed down on him. The house was his, but the lavish lifestyle that came with it was gone. The power he wielded was an illusion, and I had just turned on the lights. "You've been disowned, Clara," he whispered, his voice trembling with impotent rage. "You are no longer a part of this family. You can't fire someone who has already quit," I said softly. "You disowned me 3 months ago, in your dining room. You just didn't realize I accepted the terms. David?" I nodded to my lawyer. David slid a folder across the table to my father. "This is a cease and desist letter," he said calmly. "It formally demands you stop representing yourself as an advisor or officer of Innovate Logistics or Innovate Holdings. It also contains a restraining order, preventing you and your son from coming within 500 feet of any company property or contacting Ms. Clara or any of her employees." My father stared at the papers as if they were written in a dead language. He had been so sure of his power, so certain of his control. And in the space of 10 minutes, I had taken it all away. I hadn't screamed. I hadn't cried. I had simply presented the facts. And the facts had set me free. Watching my father and brother leave that conference room was like watching the ghosts of my past finally being exorcised. Mark, head bowed, clutching his termination letter like a death sentence, was escorted out by a security guard who treated him with the same impersonal efficiency as any other fired employee. My father, however, didn't go quietly. He crumpled the cease and desist letter in his fist, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He shot me one last look, a look that promised retribution, but it was empty. He had no more power here. I just stood there, flanked by David and Diane, and watched him walk out of my company and my life for the last time. The silence they left behind was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom. Diane put a hand on my shoulder. "You did it, Clara." I nodded, a slow, genuine smile finally reaching my face. "No," I said. "We did it." The aftermath was swift and decisive. The very next day, the moving trucks arrived at the old office. My loyal team, my true work family, packed up their desks with an air of excitement and anticipation. The old office, once a symbol of my success, now felt like a shell I was shedding. The local business paper ran a story titled, "Innovate Logistics Abruptly Relocates, Cites Strategic Restructuring." The article quoted anonymous local sources, undoubtedly my father's country club friends, who speculated the company was in trouble. I let them. The truth would be revealed in our performance, not in gossip columns. As I predicted, the first of the month brought a flurry of panicked phone calls. My mother was the first. Her voice was high-pitched with anxiety. "Clara, the card for the groceries was declined, and we got a letter from the power company. Did you forget to pay the bills?" "No, Mom," I said, my voice gentle but firm. I was on the balcony of my new apartment in Austin, overlooking a city buzzing with energy. "I didn't forget. I'm no longer paying them. The company funds were for company business. Dad's retired now. You own the house. You'll have to manage your own expenses." There was a stunned silence, followed by sputtering. But how are we supposed to do that? Your father hasn't worked in years. Mark doesn't have a job." "Mark can find one," I said, "one he's actually qualified for. And Dad has his Social Security, I assume. I've left you with a paid-for $1 million asset. You're in a better position than 99% of the population. You'll be fine." I ended the call before she could start crying. It wasn't my burden to carry anymore. The consequences for them were exactly what you'd expect. They had to sell the house. They couldn't afford the property taxes, the upkeep, or the lifestyle it represented. They downsized to a small condo in a less prestigious neighborhood. My father had to cancel his country club membership, a blow to his ego more painful than any financial loss. Mark, I heard through the grapevine, bounced between low-level sales jobs, unable to hold one for more than a few months. Without me to clean up his messes and inflate his title, he was just another unqualified guy with an attitude problem. They had built their entire identity on the foundation of my success, and when I removed that foundation, their world collapsed. Meanwhile, my world was expanding in ways I had never dreamed possible. Innovate Holdings flourished in Austin. The integration of FutureTrack's technology put us 5 years ahead of our competition. Our profits soared, My team was happy, motivated, and thriving in a culture of respect and genuine collaboration. I walked through my new office, hearing the buzz of productivity and innovation, and felt a sense of pride that was pure and untainted by obligation or resentment. I was finally the leader I was meant to be, not the caretaker of my family's fragile egos. I wasn't just Clara, the daughter. I was Clara, the CEO, the innovator, the founder. I was living in a new city, surrounded by a team that valued me for my mind and my vision, not my wallet. The weight that I had carried for so long was gone, replaced by a lightness I hadn't realized was possible. The victory wasn't just in their downfall, it was in my ascent. I hadn't just escaped a toxic system, I had built a new, healthier one from the ground up. This wasn't just a resolution, it was a rebirth. It's been a year since that meeting. I'm standing in my office now, the real one, the one in Austin. The Texas sun streams through the glass walls, illuminating a whiteboard covered in plans for our European expansion. I can hear the happy, collaborative chatter of my team outside my door. These are the sounds of a healthy, growing company. These are the sounds of my future. Do I miss them? It's a complicated question. I don't miss the constant anxiety, the feeling of never being good enough, the emotional and financial drain. But sometimes, in quiet moments, I feel a pang of sadness for the family I wished I had, the one that should have existed. I mourn the idea of a father who could be proud, a mother who would protect me, and a brother who would be my ally. But I've learned that you have to mourn the things you can't change in order to embrace the life you can. I've learned that the family you choose, the people who lift you up, who respect your work, who celebrate your victories as their own, are more real than the family you're born into. My family is here now, in Austin, working alongside me. My father called me a lowlife. For a long time, that word was a brand, a scar he'd left on me. But I've come to understand what he meant by it. To him, a lowlife was anyone who didn't fit into his narrow world of inherited status and unearned confidence. It was anyone who had to work for what they had. And you know what? He was right. I did work for it. I worked from a dusty garage. I worked through the nights. I worked when he told me my ideas were a cute hobby. If building a $45 million business with your own two hands, your own intellect, and your own resilience makes you a lowlife, then I will wear that title as the most valuable badge of honor I have ever earned. The greatest lesson in all of this is that your value is not a reflection in someone else's eyes. It's a fire you build inside yourself. For years, I was trying to warm myself by the cold embers of their approval, and I almost froze to death. The moment I walked away and decided to tend to my own fire was the moment I truly came alive. This story, the one I just told you, it's mine, but I know the feelings are universal. The feeling of being underestimated, of being undervalued by the very people who should be your biggest champions. If this story of finding justice and building a new life on your own terms resonated with you, please hit that like button so more people who need to hear this message can find our community. And in the comments below, I want you to tell me about a time you had to define your own worth, a moment you chose your own fire over someone else's cold shoulder. Your stories matter. They create a powerful chorus that can drown out the voices of doubt. Thank you for listening. And don't forget to subscribe, because every single one of us deserves to be the CEO of our own life.